Davos'tayız. Trump'ın hemen konuşması sonrasında dünyanın önde gelen ekonomi yorumcularından biriyle buluşuyoruz. Financial Times'ın baş ekonomi yazarı Martin Wolf'la birlikteyiz. Mr. Wolf, thanks for joining our program. Have you watched Trump's speech inside?
I wasn't there actually, so I would have to admit that. I watched some of it on my smartphone and I read some of the text.
So how did you find it?
It seemed to me classic Trump. It was very long. A lot of ad-libbing at the end, and most of what he said was the sort of things that Trump always says, very critical of Europe, how we're throwing everything away because we're allowing all these migrants in, obviously implicitly Muslim migrants, the statement that America is back, we're stopping mass migration, unlike those terrible Europeans. He did say, which I think is important, that at least at the moment, that he doesn't intend to take Greenland by force, but he said that, of course, only America can defend Greenland, and so it's completely unfair that we're not given it. And he said, of course, that NATO, the rest of NATO and the Europeans, as always, are very unfair to us. Mm-hmm. And those are really all favoured things. I suppose the other favourite thing was America's back, as if under Biden it collapsed, which isn't true, and that everything he's done has worked beautifully, and everything is fundamentally wonderful. He was very critical of Jay Powell, among other things. I don't think there's anything new here.
Mm-hmm. In terms of markets, the good thing is that he won't invade and he won't use the military force. But apart from that, he invited EU leaders to negotiation for Greenland. Mm-hmm. So what do you think their response will be to Trump, the EU leaders?
I presume that they will probably go and talk to him.
Do you think the talks will be
But I don't think they're going to give in. I mean, I think there's a pretty important principle for them, which is we're supporting Ukraine against the attempt by an ex-great power to seize its territory and say, it's ours, we want it back. And actually, the Soviet Union or Russia had it quite recently. So they don't want to say, accept the view of this great power. Greenland was ours, really, very long time ago, very debatable, and we want it back because they will think that that's a terrible precedent. And I've made the point, which is very important. Europe has nothing but contested borders. If all the great powers in Europe, the ex-great powers, start saying, well, we want bits of our neighbours back because it's really ours, where does it stop? Hungary, Germany, France, Italy, Austria, they all have claims on one another. This is really quite serious. So these arguments aren't acceptable to Europeans because where do you stop?
So do you say that this is crossing the red line for Europe?
I think if Denmark and Greenland and the Greenlanders were ecstatic about it and said, okay, fine, we all want to be Americans. But they don't. It's clear they don't. Okay, there aren't many people there, that's true, but it's not America. And the feeling in Europe is we don't hand people over to another power just because it demands it and it's more powerful. So I think it's not an issue that they will find it easy to compromise on.
I see. So are they going to be united in this?
That's a very good question. I don't know.
Okay, this will be very critical in terms of what will happen,
of course,
in the coming days.
I don't predict 27 countries. Well, it's more. Britain's there too, so it's 28 at least. Even Switzerland would have a voice, I think, here. So I don't know how it will play out, but the instinct is not to give in.
Okay, so you're following Davos for 30 years or something?
Not quite, 27.
27 years. You have been in Davos.
Well, I've been 25 times here. Twice it wasn't here.
Yeah, of
one
course.
was virtual because of the pandemic, and one was in 2002 in New York.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I've been here for 25 years.
So you know Davos very well.
Moderately.
So what is the difference this time? Because everybody's talking about this tension between US and Europe behind the scenes as well. What do you say?
Well, I mean, obviously, there have been lots of turmoil, economic turmoil, the huge financial crisis, the dot-com bubble bursting, the pandemic when we couldn't come here even. That was weird in a different way. But the Ukraine-Russia war was a very big issue. But basically, in all those years, if you go back at least over the last 40 years, further, the West was reasonably united. They shared bonds of trust, mutual sympathy. In a sense, they were on the right side. The last time, actually, where I think there were rather big conflicts within the West was the 70s. So very long, under Richard Nixon, the beginning of the 70s. So it's been big conflicts, but they weren't divisive. Now, what I feel is that Europe and America have lost confidence in each other, and particularly that the Europeans, who are dominant here, have lost confidence in the United States, and that's a big change.
Do you agree with what Mr. Carney says? He says that this is not a transition, this is a rupture, and Trump also criticized him on that. I
wrote a column this morning in which I said it's a fundamental regime change. The global regime has changed in the two respects. The West is obviously shattered, but more important, the support of the US for the old liberal economic and political order has gone. And I don't know whether a rupture is a consequence of that, but the underlying point is that the US is no longer committed to what the US itself created after the Second World War. In a way, that's even more fundamental.
So can we say that all these geopolitical risks and trade war combined together right now? Because he's using his trade tool as well for this Greenland.
Yes, of course. He's transformed the economic regime, and he's transforming the political regime because he's fundamentally attacking his MAGA movement plus himself, what the US was after the war, what the US, the Second World War, what the US was in the world economically and politically. He is basically saying, we think that was a con, it was a rip-off of us, we're stopping it, and we are therefore inevitably attacking these former allies.
So, Mr. Wolf, I'm trying to understand. Something is happening here. You said that this is a regime change in politics, economy, the real economy, markets, and people on the streets. There are big vacuums happening, evolving.
I wouldn't say all that. Those things work out slowly. The core thing that has happened is that policy and politics at the highest level have changed. Things don't change overnight. If you walk around Switzerland, it looks and feels much the same as it did before. And these changes that will work through as a consequence will go on, I think, for decades. I don't believe what's happened will be reversed in the United States. I think this won't last. Of course, Trump isn't immortal, but I think the United States will not be the same as it was 10, even 5 years ago, certainly before Trump came along. But the way this works through from high politics into real life, unless you have a war, which I don't expect, will be slow. Just find yourself in a more fragmented, probably poorer, more divided world.
So do you expect a crash in the stock markets? How do you think the markets will price all these in?
I don't know. I never predict stock markets because they're basically unpredictable. I regard the present stock markets as basically supported by the AI boom. That's basically what's kept them up, though it's not continued. I expect that to disappear to some degree. Then the question of what will support the stock markets is monetary policy. Will Mr. Trump, get a chairman of the Federal Reserve who will simply keep printing money? And will the markets like that or hate that? That's very difficult to predict because it's comforting in one way and very risky in the other. But my view is the stock markets look to me extremely overvalued on a fundamental basis. It would be very surprising if at some point a shock were not to happen, and the sort of thing that will trigger it is just the sort of sense that the United States is no longer a predictable, sensible power. And some of the things that Mr. Trump has been saying recently just don't look reasonable in any way.
Because some people say that Trump never wants to be in a war with markets, because we saw that in the 9th of April. Because of the tariffs, the markets collapsed and he stepped back. Now, if the markets price this badly, do you think he will step back again in the EU issue?
I think it's quite possible, if the markets were to crash, and they've been showing some signs of worry, that he will step back from the extreme conflict. He might say, we're going to postpone the tariffs for a few months. Let's have a good time for talking. He's already indicated he's a deal maker. He puts forward outrageous tariffs, and he ends up by coming back from them. So it wouldn't be implausible. I would never predict Donald Trump anyway, but it wouldn't be implausible that he'll say, possibly because of that, possibly because of the backlash in the Congress, which is clearly there on the possibility of force, that he will say, okay, let's talk. Let's do a deal. Let's see if we can find a way of doing this. Now, whether that will succeed or not, what happens after that, I have no idea. But yes, I think never predict what he will do. What he will say is pretty predictable. But what he will do, no.
And also the Gaza issues here. The peace board signing ceremony is also expected at Davos. So lots of geopolitics, lots of diplomacy. Do you say that in the past, for example, have you seen such a Davos that diplomacy is much dominant? Apart from economy, everybody's talking about geopolitical risks right now, not economy.
Well, there
or
have been
risks.
geopolitical moments in both directions. I mean, the early to mid-90s, I wasn't here, but it was obvious that the great thing was the excitement of everybody coming together after the fall of the Soviet Union. So geopolitics was huge. There were all these new free countries which were coming here, including Russia, Poland, all these. That was a tremendous geopolitical moment. The Cold War was over. Then we had China and India coming here in scale. These were huge geopolitical moments. So don't underestimate the geopolitics. Economics is always rooted in politics. The difference is that this is a conflict within the West. The conflict with Russia over Ukraine was very significant, but Russia wasn't part of the core of Davos at all. Here we've got a conflict between the two main players here, Europe and America.
This is the first time.
And this is the first time that I can remember that that the West has been so disunited.
So transatlantic alliances like crashing. So how do you think rich countries like Turkey can play a role in this big picture?
A very, very good question. I don't really have any idea. Turkey has a reasonably good chance, I would have thought, of having decent relations with both sides. It's a useful power, an important power. It's an ally. Neither side will want to alienate it. It is in NATO. I think Mr. Trump is very keen to have it on his side in what he's doing in the Middle East. So I would have thought Turkey is quite well positioned to deal with this conflict.
So when you return back to London, what will be on your file? What will be your next
I don't know.
column?
There are many things that I'm thinking about. I've been thinking about what is US really now doing a deal with China behind the scenes? Has America given up on conflict with China? Because he doesn't talk about it, does he? Not really. I think he's frightened of China. And I think maybe he's also rather admires it. I think the question is, can relations between the US and Europe be reconstructed? And if they can't, where will Europe go is a huge one. The future of American policy, the war on the Fed is a very, very big issue, and the implications for the market. There are just so many gigantic questions now. I mean, in a fundamental way, Trump is the most important figure in the world stage, and he's so different from anybody else who's been in this job that, of course, people start saying, well, what's going to happen next?
Okay, last question, Mr. Wolf.
I apologize about the
apart from this, what is the most new and interesting thing that you have heard at this Davos?
Well, that's a bit depressing. I haven't heard anything. I've only been here a day and a half, so maybe it will still happen the next day and a half. But nobody has said to me anything really, really new. So a year ago, we were all really excited about trying to, 2 years ago, to understanding this thing called AI. But I haven't come across something incredibly exciting and new on that. I think I haven't been in the discussions of quantum computing and all the rest of it. I may have missed something there, but I think the dominant issue is one that we've now got used to. Don't forget, it's now a year after Trump became president. We now know that Trump 2 is completely different from Trump 1. We know he is transforming the United States and the world. And what we're learning is more and more of the same. It's not transformative. And we also know that Europe has no idea what to do about it. And that's dominating the discussions I'm being involved in. And it's a pity because I'd love to learn new stuff, but in this conversation, with Davos is basically a huge conversation, I haven't heard that, something different. But let me be clear, I see only a tiny fraction of Davos.
Yeah, lots of meetings and everything.
There's so much going on around there. All sorts of genius stuff maybe is happening here, but I'm not there.
Okay, Mr. Wolf, thank you so much for making this time in this cold weather. Thank you so much.
Yes, it's a great pleasure.
Thank you.
As always. Thank you.